Eris and Mor are rejected mates, part 1. First of all, Eris's quote, "Don't believe the lies they tell you about me. She knows the truth but has not revealed it." Eris can't tell them the truth about them being rejected mates because if he did, he would have to explain why, which, as we know, Mor prefers females, and Eris is not gonna be the one to out her. She has to do that herself, hence his quote. I also think that they planned the entire thing with their arranged marriage. I think that he knew that she was going to taint herself that night, and she knew that he was going to put on this huge, disgusted act in front of his father. Like, she was fucked by an Illyrian brute. I don't want her, blah, 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 blah. He does that consistently through the series in front of his father and his father's cronies. Because he has to, basically, to stay alive. Secondly, they don't get in too close proximity to one another. Even in the High Lords meeting, they're kind of at opposite ends of the table. I think this is because if they do get too close to one another, other people would be able to scent the bond. And since Mor rejected him and it's not a nurtured bond, it wouldn't have that strong of a scent anyway, unless they were in close proximity to one another. Also, at the High Lords meeting, when Azriel is choking out Eris for saying that she dressed like a slut, Mor is pale and shaking, and she stayed that way for over a half an hour after the fact, Feyre notes. So I believe that this was her having an adverse reaction to her mate almost dying, which makes sense because you can't get rid of a mate bond. Like, you can verbally reject a mate bond. Like, the female can be like, I reject you, don't want this bond, fine. But you can't do anything to make the actual bond go away. It just probably just diminishes a little throughout the centuries in strength, if I had to guess. Then we have Mor's point of view in ACOTAR of the actual event that happened between them, where Keir found out that she tainted herself with Cassian. She had gone back to the Court of Nightmares for some reason, who knows, and Keir put a nail through her abdomen and dumped her on the Autumn Court border with a note saying that she was Eris's problem. And Eris knew that if he touched her to help, according to Autumn Court law, she would automatically become his property, not only because they were fiancés through the arranged marriage still, even if, like, Eris was like, no, I don't want her, but Mor literally says, like, she would have become Autumn Court property, and Beren would have tied her to the marriage bed. So Eris had to make a quick decision here. I don't think that he wanted to cause her harm. Obviously, if they're mates, he would have felt her pain. Like, I think that using his famed Autumn Court control, kind of like what Lucien has, he had to put on this hardened mask because, again, Beren's guards were with him that day. And they were like, oh, she's gonna die, like, da-da-da. And he's like, don't touch her. Don't touch her. Don't touch her. Because if they touched her, she would have been Autumn Court property. And Eris had to know that she wanted her freedom. Like, that was the whole point of everything, and rejecting him and all of this. Like, he had to make the decision to either help her through the pain or give her her freedom. Because, like, being stuck in the Autumn Court with Beren would have been equally as terrible as being stuck in the Court of Nightmares with Keir. They're both terrible, awful, horrible people. Eris knew that she couldn't love him the way that a mate is supposed to love their mate because, again, I think he knows that she prefers females romantically. And this is also why he doesn't tell the IC, because again, he's not going to be the one to out her. And you have to think about his point of view. Like, their bond had to have been screaming at him, like, save your mate, save your mate, save your mate. And, like, him leaving her there must have fucking killed him to do. But ultimately, that's how he saved her. He gave her freedom that she wanted and needed desperately. And he knew that her family was going to be looking for her. Like, he knew that Rhys or Az or Cassian or someone was going to be looking for her. So he left her there on the border where Azriel could find her from up above when he was flying. And I feel bad for him. Obviously, I feel bad for Mor for that whole situation that happened. But, like, the fact that he had to pretend that he didn't give a shit when he clearly did give a shit is awful. Now on to Akasif hints. Now, Akasif. In Akasif, there was one thing, well, there's plenty of things, but there was one thing regarding Nesta that stood out to me, and it's the fact that we know that Mor was teaching Nesta how to dance Autumn Court dances. Which, did Eris teach her at some point? But anyways, Nesta makes a comment to Mor saying, does it bother you that I will be dancing with Eris? And Mor says, no, because I know you'll make him crawl by the end of it. And I took this as a hint that Nesta might know or suspect that they're rejected mates, or that Mor had maybe said something during one of their lessons to make Nesta believe that she doesn't really hate Eris as much as she makes everyone else believe. So I thought that was very interesting that Mor would know the kind of dances that they have in the Autumn Court, unless her and Eris are actually friends and just put on this mask in front of other people. But I'm going to get back to that. There's also a scene where Cassian goes to meet with the Band of Exiles and Eris, and Mor drops him off by winnowing, and then she winnows away. When Eris shows up minutes later, he just sniffs the air, and he's like, she could have come in, you know. And Cassian makes note how it's very weird that he can still scent her minutes later on an outside breeze, and also mentions how Mor does this on occasion regarding Eris too, and that it's... Now, after the whole scenting her on the breeze and Cassian saying how weird it was that Mor also does that on occasion, we have the scene where Rhys makes a deal with Keir, and Keir and some of his Court of Nightmares are allowed to come in and out of Velaris as part of this deal. And we know how anxious and terrified Mor was of that, which that's a shitty thing to do to your cousin Mor. But anyways, we have Eris show up, and I think it's Rhys and Mor and maybe Feyre in this scene. I forget completely. But anyways, they're all huddled around. And Eris is standing a little bit away because, remember, proximity. And he makes it known that Keir will not ever be coming to Velaris. He says to Mor that she doesn't have to worry about him coming to Velaris, that he had given up something precious to prevent it. And this just screamed mate bond to me, because as her mate, I think he could feel that fear and that anxiety within her. Not only that, but, like, he remembers what Keir did to her once upon a time, and that's why she, like, hates him and is afraid of him so much. But also the fact that, like, male mates are always going to be super protective over their female mates. And I think that was him being protective over Mor. But yeah, I think Eris making some really important sort of deal with Keir not to ever show up to Velaris was him protecting his mate, even if they're rejected, which that was very sweet to me, actually. Which leads me into, like, a little theory of mine. I don't think that Eris and Mor actually hate each other. I think that they're actually pretty good friends, despite everything. I think that they play a very good acting game in front of other people. If the inner circle thinks that they hate each other's guts, they're not going to be looking or privy to the fact that they're rejected mates. They're not going to be, like, scenting a mate bond or anything like that. They're just going to think, oh, they hate each other because of what he did to her, because again, they don't know the truth. And also, like, their hatred scenes are pretty, like, petty and juvenile. Like I said, like when Eris said that she'd still dress like a slut at the High Lords meeting, he did end up apologizing to her, not just because of Azriel, I don't think, but because he realized, like, that was still, like, a shitty thing to say to someone who's even, like, kind of his friend, even though it was like, a good mask. And it was sincere enough that his mother looked proud of him for the apology. So there was also that. I think some proof that goes with my theory that they're actually friends and they don't actually hate each other behind closed doors kind of stood out to me just because every time I noted that Eris was being, like, a dick or horrible or just acting like an awful person, it was only in front of either the inner circle, his father, or his father's cronies. Or Lucian, because Lucian has to believe that he's a bad person, because Lucian wears his heart on his sleeve. Come on. That's a whole other thing. But he has to make them believe that they hate each other. Because God only knows what Baron would do if he knew that this was all an act. Like, he would probably still try to force that marriage because of their power, their combined power. Like the same way he did when Mor was dumped at the border and he had to convince the guards that he hated her or didn't care. I think it kills him still to do this, but again, he's not going to out her. I do think they planned this entire thing where she was going to taint herself with Cassian, as I said before, and she knew what he was going to say about her in front of Baron, and that had to be done because Baron is Baron, and he would have probably just fucking killed him. But yeah, Eris had to adjust and ultimately and difficultly chose Mor's freedom, knowing that she could not. I got cut off, but yeah, he knows that she couldn't love him romantically because she prefers females. I do think that was discussed between them as friends when the marriage was arranged. I do think that Mor knows who Eris actually is behind the mask. I think that Eris knows who Mor actually is behind the mask. There was just plenty of little, like, interactions or, like, them, like, looking at each other, which was just kind of weird, and I don't think that they hate each other. I just don't. I think, especially because it's over-exaggerated, almost every time their hatred comes into play, like, it's just over-exaggerated, and that just set off alarm bells in my head, like, this can't be real. Like, they're just being petty. But, not only that, but Eris has to, like, want like love or whatever in the future, and he wouldn't want to be in like a loveless marriage or mating with someone who prefers females because he's seen what a loveless marriage is. Like, he sees his father abusing his mother, he's seen Tamlin's parents, he's seen Rhys's parents. Like, he doesn't want that for himself, and I don't think he wanted that for Mor either. And that's why they planned this entire thing. And I think he's just getting frustrated because she's not telling everyone the truth after centuries. I wasn't going to make this apart, but it kind of applies. So going back to the Mor and Nesta scene when Mor is telling her about the dances and all of this and teaching her, and Nesta asks, you know, are you upset that I'll be dancing with Eris? And Mor says no, because I know you'll make him crawl by the end of it. And then we have the scene of Eris dancing with Nesta, and then obviously asking Rhys for her hand in marriage. And he seemed super desperate for that. And then Rhys is just like, well, why do you want her so bad? Like, what? Why do you want her so bad? And Eris is like, I have my reasons. And even Cassian notes that, like, there's some underlying thing aside from, like, lust. And you guys know that I don't think Nesta and Cassian are actually mates. But I'm wondering if this is, like, a second chance mate bond with Eris and Nesta. And Eris just thinks that, like, she's his last chance at love. Because obviously he can't get Mor, because Mor prefers females. And I do actually have a big long theory on my YouTube, which you guys can look up if you want, about how Nesta is going to end up with Eris. And this would be a really cool twist because SJM did say some people can have two mates. I don't really know if this would be a part of what I was already discussing, but this just came to me. Mor has the Veritas orb. But not only that, but she has her own truth powers, but she also has the Veritas orb. I'm wondering if she knows that Nesta is Eris's second chance mate. I'm wondering if that's why she was throwing herself all over Cassian and seemingly doing whatever she could to prevent them from being together. Also, what if she knows that Gwen is also Eris's daughter? Because the Veritas orb shows you the truth. So she could just ask, like, show me Eris. Like, show me his truths or whatever, right? And this bitch has so many secrets. It's ridiculous. I mean, that kind of would be a mirror to, like, Eris not outing her and then, like, her not telling Eris about this because Baron would obviously kill Gwen as, like, a partial lesser. But yeah,